Why do men become so painfully literal the second a woman stops being careful? It was a dance, not an affair. I sat on a stranger's lap for less than a minute because the club was running a contest and I wanted to win. Was I supposed to stand there like a good little wife while every other woman gave the crowd a real show? My friends understood it, and the man in the chair understood it. My husband sat at our table with his thumb pressed into the scar on his palm, wearing that flat face men use when they cannot control a room. If he chose to turn one prize into betrayal, that was his problem. My name is Harriet Quinn. I was 32, and I ran recruitment for a hospital network in Chicago. My job was to decide who looked ready before they had proved anything. I coached nervous people to enter a room as if they had already been selected. A steady voice mattered, and eye contact mattered more. If 5 people leaned forward when you spoke, you were doing well. I believed rooms were honest that way. Jonah and I had been together 9 years and married 6. He was a structural engineer for a national firm, the kind of man who trusted load tables more than promises. When he had trouble saying what he felt, his thumb pressed into a pale scar across his left palm. He had carried that scar since a shop class accident at 14. I used to take his hand and pull his thumb away. Later, I began calling it his pause button. There had been real warmth between us. During my first winter at the hospital, hiring fares kept me downtown past 10. Jonah waited near the train station with a cinnamon pretzel inside his coat so it would stay warm. He never complained about the late hour. He asked which candidate surprised me, listened on the ride home, then wiped salt from my gloves before hanging them up. That was how he loved, quietly and usefully. It was also how he stopped reaching me. As his projects grew larger, my evenings grew louder. If I said we had become roommates, Jonah checked our calendars and offered Saturday morning. If I said I needed him to want me, he planned dinner. He treated every feeling like a weak beam that could be supported if I told him where to place the steel. I was not wrong about that part. Literally, I was not. 3 months before the club, his firm offered him a project director role in Seattle. Jonah brought the grey folder home and left it beside my laptop. I did not open it. Seattle meant rain, a smaller apartment, and rebuilding my career in a city where no one knew my name. I told him we needed to choose our marriage before another project. He declined the offer the next morning. I thanked him, of course. Then I asked why he looked unhappy after getting exactly what a husband should want. He pressed his thumb into the scar and said he was trying to make the choice mean something good. I heard reluctance. I heard a man asking for credit because he had stayed. By the week of Maisie Cole's promotion party, I wanted one night that did not need a calendar invitation. Maisie worked with me in recruitment and had recently ended a long relationship. She treated hesitation like a disease she had survived. When she booked a booth at the Ember Room, she said no husbands were allowed to turn the night into a feelings meeting. Jonah came because I asked him to. That should count for something, but at the time it only proved he could still follow directions. The door staff fastened gold plastic bands around our wrists. Mine caught the blue light each time I lifted my drink. Jonah rubbed the edge of his band and asked how late I wanted to stay. I told him midnight, maybe 1. Literally one simple answer. He nodded and looked toward the exit sign as if he had already started waiting to leave. The Ember Room was below street level, with black brick walls and a ceiling low enough to hold the heat. Bass moved through the booth seats. Every few minutes, a train passed behind the far wall and made the bottles tremble. Maisie had invited Tori and Ben from our old apartment building, 2 women from my office, and Jonah's sister, Ruth. Ruth came late and sober because she had an early shift at the library. She hugged me, touched Jonah's shoulder, then chose the seat where she could hear without shouting. The night belonged to me almost at once. Maisie gave a toast about women who stopped waiting to be noticed. My co-workers shouted my name when she said I had taught her to ask for the title she deserved. Even Ben, who usually discussed baseball with Jonah, told me the hospital was lucky to have me. Maisie had made my marriage part of the story she told about her own breakup. Her former boyfriend had missed the dinner where she learned about the promotion, then sent flowers to her office the next day. She returned them because she said late attention was only guilt with a delivery fee. Each time I complained that Jonah had gone quiet, She used it as proof that sensible women waited too long. If I could still be bold inside a marriage, then leaving hers had not made her reckless. It had made her early. That was why she watched Jonah closely. She needed him to look like the kind of man women outgrew. Jonah smiled and lifted his glass. His thumb stayed against the scar. I asked if he was enjoying himself. He said he was glad Maisie had been promoted. That answer irritated me because it was accurate and empty. I wanted him to say I looked beautiful under the blue lights. I wanted him to lean close without being asked. Instead, he moved my drink away from the edge of the table when someone bumped the booth. Useful and quiet, as usual. Before the second round arrived, I pulled him toward the dance floor. He came as far as the edge, where the bass was loudest, then asked if we could wait until the group near the speakers moved. There was no room to turn without hitting someone. I said people who wanted to dance found room. People who wanted to delay found reasons. Jonah asked whether that was what the night was about. He meant us. I heard another attempt to take the attention away from Maisie and place it on his discomfort. I returned to the booth without him. Maisie saw the exchange. She tightened the loose end of my gold wristband and said a man could drain the life from a room while sounding perfectly reasonable. Ruth reminded her that Jonah had just refused a major move because I asked him to stay. Maisie answered that staying did not buy permanent gratitude. I liked the sentence enough to repeat it when the drinks arrived. At 9:40, Jonah's phone lit with the name Celia Park. She was a regional director at his firm and the person who had offered Seattle. Jonah silenced the call. I asked whether his office was still trying to make him regret saying no. He said the position had not been filled, and Celia wanted an answer if he changed his mind. I told him there was no answer to change. His thumb pressed deeper into his palm. He said he knew what he had promised me. I kissed his cheek and called him a good man. The exchange felt settled because I had ended it kindly. At 10, an MC climbed onto the small stage between the bar and the dance floor. He wore a red jacket and spoke like every sentence came with a drum roll. He announced the Hot Seat Contest, a Friday game sponsored by a boutique hotel near the lake. 4 volunteers would be matched with 4 strangers. Each pair had 45 seconds. No kissing, no clothes removed. The crowd would choose the winner by volume. The prize was a 2-night hotel stay for 2. Maisie grabbed my wrist before the rules were finished. She said I trained people to own rooms for a living, and now I had to prove I could do it myself. The gold band flashed between her fingers. I said married women were allowed to dance. Ruth asked whether Jonah wanted to be my partner. The MC had already explained that partners would be selected from the opposite side of the room. Couples and friends were not allowed to enter together. Jonah leaned toward me. He did not raise his voice. He said he understood a dance contest, but sitting on another man and performing for the room would cross a line for him. He asked me not to volunteer. It was clear. I will give him that. It was also painfully literal. One club rule for 45 seconds in a chair had become a private test of my character. Maisie rolled her eyes and said men loved confident women until confidence happened in public. My co-workers laughed. Ben looked down at the wet ring beneath his glass. Ruth asked me to hear what Jonah was actually saying. That made me angrier than his request. Everyone had heard him place a fence around me, and now his sister wanted me to thank him for describing it softly. The MC called for the last female contestant. I stood. Jonah caught my hand before I left the booth. His grip was light. He asked one more time whether winning this particular game mattered more than the thing he had just told me. The table went quiet enough for me to hear the train behind the wall. I laughed. Then I gave him the sentence everyone remembers. Oh my God, relax. It's literally just a contest. Maisie cheered first. My co-workers followed, and the sound made the choice feel approved. I walked to the stage while the MC called me the brave wife from table 7. Behind me, Jonah let his hand fall to the table. The stranger chosen for me was named Nico. That was all I learned. He was in Chicago for a bachelor weekend and had a paper crown pushed back on his dark hair. He looked at my wedding band, then toward Jonah's table. He asked the MC something I could not hear. The MC laughed and announced that the husband knew the rules. The room treated that as consent. I watched the first 3 contestants from the side of the stage. One woman spent most of her time laughing and barely touched her partner. The meter stopped at 61. The next circled the chair, took the stranger's hat, and wore it for the final beat. She reached 78. The third contestant tried to pull her partner up to dance, but he stepped on her foot and the crowd laughed for the wrong reason. The MC told me 80 was the number to beat. He smoothed the paper crown on Nico's head, turned the chair toward the booth, and asked whether Chicago was ready for a married woman to show the single girls how confidence worked. There it was. If I held back, Jonah's discomfort would become the reason I lost. The other choice sounded like confidence. Nico sat in the chair under the white spotlight. He kept both hands on his knees and gave me a nervous smile. For the first 10 seconds, I danced in front of him without touching. The crowd made polite noise. Another contestant had already climbed onto the back of her partner's chair, and I could tell polite noise would not win. I knew audiences. I knew the difference between attention and commitment. They were watching, but they had not chosen me yet. Maisie cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted for me to go for it. My co-workers slapped the table. The MC began counting the final 30 seconds. I stepped between Nico's knees and placed my hands on his shoulders. His smile widened. The noise rose. The spotlight warmed the back of my neck. Nico smelled of mint and the smoke machine near the stage. His paper crown slipped to one side when he looked toward his friends. They were filming him. Not me, but for those seconds the difference did not matter. Their screens were pointed at the chair. Every face beyond them waited for me to decide how far the performance would go. I lifted one of Nico's hands, turned beneath it, and let it fall back to his knee. The meter climbed into the 70s. The MC told the room I was close. Maisie stood on the lower step of our booth, waving both arms as if she could pull the number higher herself. That should have been enough. Then I looked at Jonah. He was not glaring. Anger would have given me something simple to reject. His face had gone still in a way I had never seen. It was not cold or embarrassed. It looked empty, as if someone had removed him from behind his own eyes and left the rest sitting at the booth. His thumb was buried in the scar on his palm. For one beat, my feet stopped. I knew he had not been bluffing. I knew the word line had meant exactly what it sounded like. Ruth was watching me too, her mouth slightly open. Ben had turned away from the stage. The crowd started to lose interest. That was when I made the choice Jonah remembered. I smiled at him. Then I turned, lowered myself across Nico's lap, and moved with the beat. Nothing came off. There was no kiss. Nico's hands lifted from his knees, uncertain, and settled at my waist only after the room shouted for him to do it. I did not remove them. I leaned back far enough to see the booth upside down behind the lights. Jonah saw me seeing him. The MC counted 5. The room counted with him. By 1, people were standing. I got up before the music stopped and raised both arms. Nico laughed with the shocked relief of a man who had survived being chosen in public. Maisie screamed. My co-workers were recording. Tori clapped with one hand while holding Ben's wrist with the other. The crowd meter on the screen hit 93. No other contestant reached 80. I won. The MC clipped a black tag marked winner around my gold wristband and handed me a black envelope. The hotel logo shone in silver across the front. Nico stood beside me for a photograph. He smiled at the camera. I smiled at Jonah. Then I returned to the table. My husband did not clap. He did not call me a name. He did not knock over a glass or ask Nico to step outside. He looked at the black envelope, then at my face. His thumb moved once across the scar and stopped. I told him he could at least congratulate me. He asked whether I had seen his face before I sat down. That question was unfair in its precision. I had a prize in my hand and half the club still cheering. I said of course I had seen him. The point had been to make him loosen up. Jonah asked whether the cheering had become louder after I saw that he was hurt. I told him not to examine a dance like a failed bridge. He nodded without arguing. Then he removed the gold band from his own wrist, placed it beside his untouched drink, and left. The absence of a scene annoyed me more than a scene would have. He had made me look cruel by refusing to participate in the joke. People near our booth began pretending not to watch me. I sat in Jonah's place and opened the black envelope before the MC finished thanking the sponsor. My steady hands mattered to me. A guilty woman would have chased her husband into the cold or hidden in the bathroom. I stayed under the lights with the prize in front of me because I had done nothing that required hiding. Still, every cheer after that sounded smaller. The club had already spent its loudest reaction on me, and Jonah had taken the only face I still wanted to change out of the room. Maisie pulled me into another photograph and said he would cool down. Her smile stayed ready for the camera, but she did not look at the door. Ruth followed Jonah without saying goodbye. Ben asked Tori if she wanted to leave. My co-workers returned to their drinks with the careful energy people use after a glass breaks in a restaurant. Nico came over once. He congratulated me, asked the MC to send him the photograph, then went back to his bachelor group. He did not ask for my number. That was fine. Literally, I did not want him. I wanted the win. At 11:18, Celia's name appeared on Jonah's phone where he had left it beside his glass. Celia's call flashed above his gold wristband beside the phone. I pushed both toward Ben and told him Jonah would come back once he had walked around the block. He did not come back. Ben carried the phone outside and found Jonah near the corner. He returned alone. I stayed another hour because leaving at once would have turned his mood into the final event of Maisie's party. We opened the black envelope. The voucher covered 2 nights in a corner room, breakfast included. Maisie said Jonah would be grateful after he stopped performing injury. I said he had always needed time to catch up with me. By then, the office recordings had moved into our group chat. In the clearest one, my face turned toward the booth before I lowered myself onto Nico. Tori did not react to the clip. Ben left the chat at 12:10. Maisie added a crown symbol and called me undefeated. The word looked right beneath the video. Jonah was awake when I reached home. He sat in the living room with the Seattle folder open on the coffee table. His phone was charging beside it. The apartment smelled of the rosemary soap he used after working late. I put the black envelope on the table and asked if he planned to punish me all weekend. He did not answer that question. He asked again whether I had seen his face before the last part of the dance. I said we had already covered it. Yes, I saw him. Yes, I knew he was uncomfortable. I also knew he was safe. I was dressed, and an MC was counting down in front of 200 people. Context mattered. Jonah asked what his pain had added to the context. I laughed because the wording sounded dramatic. I told him his pain had not been part of my plan. Winning had been the plan, and the crowd wanted something bold. He wanted to know why I smiled at him before I did it. That detail caught against me. I placed the envelope over the Seattle folder and said I smiled because he was my husband. I had wanted him included. Jonah looked at the envelope covering the city he had given up. His thumb pressed into the scar. He said being forced to watch was not the same as being included. I told him that sentence was exactly why I felt trapped with him. Every ordinary thing became a definition. Every messy feeling became a rule. He could not just be jealous. He had to build a moral system around a chair. For a while, he said nothing. Then he admitted that jealousy was part of it. He had wanted to cross the room. He had wanted to ask everyone to stop looking at his wife. What kept him seated was the hope that I would see him and choose to stop without being pulled away. I heard another test I had failed without agreeing to take. I told him secure, men did not need women to perform obedience in public. He said secure marriages did not turn a clear no into entertainment. That was the closest he came to anger. I went to bed in the main bedroom. Jonah slept in the small room where he kept project samples. In the morning, the grey Seattle folder was gone. So were the framed license certificates from his wall. I assumed he had taken them to work. Jonah organized when he could not communicate. The habit was so common that it did not deserve a larger meaning. Over the next week, he withdrew in ways too small to accuse cleanly. The coffee pot held 4 cups instead of 6. He stopped asking when I would be home. On Tuesday, I came in after a hospital dinner and found no hallway light waiting for me. On Thursday, he bought cinnamon pretzels at the station and left mine on the counter until it hardened inside the bag. His project room changed too. Rolled bridge drawings that had leaned beside the desk for years disappeared. His winter boots were gone from the hall. The metal case holding his professional stamp moved from the bottom drawer to the top of a plastic storage bin. A packet of shipping labels appeared near the printer. When I asked what he was doing, he said the firm wanted old project materials sorted before the next assignment. I asked which assignment. He said nothing was final. Literally, that meant there was nothing to discuss. I told Maisie Jonah was making ordinary office cleanup look mysterious because mystery was the only leverage he had left. I called those things passive aggression. Maisie agreed at first. She said quiet men liked to make women hunt for crimes that had no names. Ruth did not agree. She came by Sunday for a box Jonah had stored in our closet. While he carried it downstairs, she asked me whether I understood why the moment after I saw his face mattered more than the dance before it. I told her a face was not a contract. Ruth said neither was marriage if only one person treated the other's words as real. She did not raise her voice. That family had a talent for making judgments sound like weather. After she left, Jonah measured the narrow bookcase in his project room and entered the number on his phone. I asked whether he planned to replace it. He said he was checking what would fit if he needed a smaller room. I asked if he wanted me to beg him not to move out. His thumb found the scar. He said he wanted me to tell him what I believed I had done. I repeated that I had danced to win a contest. He lowered the tape measure. The pause between us was long enough for the refrigerator motor to start and stop. He said that was his answer too. I took it as another sulk. Maisie's replies began to slow after Ruth spoke to Tori. A message that once received a voice note in seconds got a thumbs up after lunch. When I asked why everyone was treating me like I had cheated, Maisie said people were reacting to the smile in the video. She still believed Jonah was too rigid, but she wished I had not looked at him first. I reminded her that she had cheered. She said she had cheered before she saw his face. That distinction sounded convenient. I stopped sending her every update. At work, I had a final interview for a nursing director. The candidate gave polished answers until I asked why she had left her last hospital. She looked at the panel, then at me, and admitted that she had kept defending one decision because changing her explanation would force her to admit the decision was wrong. For half a minute, I heard my own voice in hers. I almost opened the clip under the table. I almost watched the moment when Jonah's face went empty and asked myself why I had needed the noise to rise after that. Then the candidate began blaming her former team. The feeling passed. I marked her as defensive and moved to the next question. Jonah stopped wearing his wedding band at home on the 8th day. He placed it in a shallow dish near his project samples, beside 2 bolts and an old transit card. I asked whether that was supposed to frighten me. He said no. Nothing he did next was meant to produce a reaction from me. That sentence should have frightened me. Instead, it sounded like surrender. 4 days later, Jonah asked me to meet at a coffee shop near my office. He had chosen a place with small tables and no music. I arrived ready to set terms. I would admit the dance looked worse on video. He would admit his response had turned a joke into a crisis. Then we would use the hotel voucher, sleep late, and return to Chicago as adults. Jonah listened while I explained the plan. His left hand rested open beside his cup. He did not touch the scar. He said there was one path he was willing to try. I had to name the part after I saw his face as deliberate. Not the whole contest. Not the first 10 seconds. Just the moment when I knew he was hurt and used that knowledge to make the room louder. If I could say that plainly, he would attend counseling before making a final choice about us. I asked whether he had rehearsed the speech with Ruth. He said no. I told him forced confessions were not therapy. If his love depended on me accepting his wording, then he was not asking for honesty. He was asking for control. Jonah pressed his lips together, but his hand stayed open. I finally said the one thing he had no defense against. For almost 2 years, he had answered loneliness with reservations, reminders, and grocery lists. He decided Seattle alone, declined Seattle alone, and expected me to understand the sacrifice from a grey folder I never asked to read. He had left me emotionally long before I crossed the club floor. Jonah looked down at his coffee. He admitted that work had become the place where questions had clear answers. At home, he avoided conversations once he believed he would fail them. He had made silence look like patience and expected practical care to cover what he would not say. It was completely true. For a moment, I had what I claimed to want. He was present. He was not hiding behind a plan. The man across the table was hurt, flawed, and asking me for one honest sentence. I used his admission to defeat the request. I told him the contest had not created our marriage. It had only shown him what years of neglect had produced. If he wanted counseling, he could begin by admitting that my dance was a symptom of his absence. The server came to refill our water and stopped when she saw neither of us had touched the first glasses. Jonah thanked her anyway. He waited until she moved to the next table before asking whether every wound I carried gave me permission to choose where the next wound went. The question sounded polished enough to be cruel. I said pain was not being assigned like office work. People reacted. Marriages produced reactions, and he did not get to approve only the ones that made him comfortable. Jonah asked whether I could say his absence made me lonely without saying it made me sit on a stranger after he asked me not to. I said he was being literal again. He nodded once. Then he asked whether I wanted the narrow bookcase, the dining table, or both if we lived apart. I laughed. He had moved from feelings to furniture in less than a minute. That proved my entire accusation, so I chose the dining table and told him he could keep the bookcase for whatever sad room he was measuring. His thumb did not touch the scar. The hotel voucher had to be used before the end of the month. Jonah said he did not want it. I asked Maisie to come instead. She hesitated, then agreed after I promised the weekend would not become a campaign against my husband. On Friday afternoon, Jonah watched me place a dress and the black envelope into a small travel bag. He asked whether I planned to post about the trip. I said I did not plan my life around his comfort anymore. He said that answered the question. The boutique hotel was only 20 minutes from our apartment. Its corner room had tall windows facing the lake and a bottle of sparkling wine waiting beneath a card that congratulated the contest winner and guest. Maisie read the card, set it down, and said the word guest felt strange. I told her she was overthinking paper. That night we ate downstairs. Maisie changed the subject each time I mentioned Jonah. At 10, she went to bed with a headache. I stayed by the window and watched the club video without sound. My pause before the final move was visible. So was Jonah's face. The crowd could not be heard, which made my smile look different. I turned the volume back on. The cheering restored the correct meaning. I posted a photograph from the hotel room with the black envelope in my hand and the gold wristband around it. My caption said some men loved a confident woman until she won without them. The sentence received 68 likes before midnight. 2 co-workers called it perfect. Strangers said Jonah was insecure. I pinned one comment asking why men always made harmless fun about ownership. Maisie saw the post in the morning. She asked me to remove the photograph of her reflection from the window. I cropped her out and kept the caption. Then I messaged Jonah the link. That was voluntary. There was no MC counting, no drink in my hand, no friend shouting my name. I wanted him to see that his silence could not take the win back from me. He viewed the message at 8:14. At 8:16, he replied that he understood. 2 words, without an accusation. I counted 4 hours before I called. He did not answer. I called again after lunch and once before dinner. At 9, he wrote that he was handling the practical decisions we had discussed and would speak when I returned. I showed Maisie. She said the word decisions sounded serious. I told her Jonah used serious words when he wanted ordinary sulking to look official. Maisie did not agree. She packed her toiletries before breakfast and left without taking the hotel slippers she had joked about stealing. I stayed until checkout. The clerk removed the gold winner tag from my wristband because it caught on the room key sleeve. I asked to keep it. He placed the band and tag inside the black envelope. On the ride home, I planned the speech Jonah would hear. It would begin with the compromise I had offered and the fact that I came home. He would get 1 week to stop punishing me. Then I would decide whether the marriage still deserved my effort. By the time the car reached our block, I was certain the quiet part was over. The apartment door opened against a cardboard box. I pushed harder and found the living room cut in half. Jonah's books were gone from the long shelf. The bridge photographs had disappeared. His blue chair was missing, leaving 4 clean marks in the rug. My dining table remained exactly where I chose it. Jonah came out of the project room carrying the narrow bookcase with a mover behind him. He wore work clothes and no wedding band. His scar showed, but his thumb rested elsewhere. I set the black envelope on the table and asked what he thought he was doing. He said the Seattle offer had been reopened. He had accepted it on Monday morning, 9 days after the contest. The apartment there was small, so the bookcase would fit and the blue chair would not. Celia had arranged his first month near the office. His flight left Tuesday. The grey folder and Celia's call at the club came back first. Then I saw the missing certificates, the measured shelf, his questions about furniture, and his open hand at the coffee shop. None of it was new. Only the answer was. I gripped the back of the dining chair and told him people did not move across the country because of one dance. Jonah said he was not moving because I danced. He was moving because I saw him ask me to stop, saw what continuing did to him, and decided the applause was worth more. The post from the hotel removed the last excuse about drinks or pressure. I said he had left our marriage in secret while making me think we were still arguing. He admitted that was true. He had started leaving inside the moment I smiled at him from the stage. He should have told me before he made calls and measured furniture. Instead, he used decisions because decisions were easier than staying in a conversation where he could be hurt again. That was his cruelty, quiet and fully arranged. I asked whether he had ever intended to attend counselling. He said yes, until I sent him the hotel post. Then he understood that I did not want him to understand me. I wanted him to lose in public. The mover returned and asked whether the bookcase was going or staying. Jonah said it was going. The man lifted one end without looking at either of us. My explanation had nowhere to land. I reached for the old defense anyway. It had been a contest. Nico had been a stranger. Nothing physical continued after the music. Jonah looked at the black envelope on the table. He said he knew. That was why the stranger's name did not matter. Nico had never followed my account. The club photograph later appeared in his bachelor group's public album with me, labelled only as the contest woman. He had gone back to his life before Jonah even left the booth. Maisie did not answer when I called from the half-empty room. Jonah said the petition for dissolution would be served after he landed in Seattle. I kept the Chicago apartment until the lease ended, while Jonah moved into a one-bedroom place within walking distance of his new office. Our joint account closed after the last shared bill, and the Seattle salary I had once dismissed never entered our life together. Maisie stopped inviting me out, while Tori and Ben saw me only at gatherings where Jonah was not expected. Nico removed the club photograph after his fiancée objected, and my follow request stayed unanswered until I cancelled it. At work, I still taught candidates to own the room, but I stopped using the words selected in my coaching notes. I understand the sequence now. That is not the same as an apology. I wanted proof that I could move a room, and Jonah had spent years giving me a love that made almost no sound. When he finally gave me one clear boundary, I needed the crowd to erase it. He did the literal thing in the end. He believed what I showed him. The black hotel envelope stayed in the dining table drawer after the voucher expired. The gold wristband still said winner on the night Jonah's plane landed in Seattle.